All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Bert and I are both very excited to be here to provide this CLE event for you all and to cover, how you can maximize the impact of your non-attorney staff while, of course, remaining compliant. So to get started, I'm just going to introduce myself, and keep in mind, we're going to try and leave some time at the end to answer some of your questions. But my name is Sam Alkoubey. I'm the head of sales here at PracticePanther. I've worked with countless law firms and really got to understand the inner workings of the many different types of firms, the different practice areas, the different sizes of firms. And one of the most common things I hear from these firms is, hey, Sam, what's the easiest way and the quickest way to get everything done that I need to, in a fast and easy fashion? So for years now, PracticePanther has enabled a lot of law firms, tens of thousands of people, to automate their practices, help people get more done in less time. Our all-in-one solution is compliant with ABA and state bar associations and helps offer the security, the visibility, the accessibility needed to manage remote non-attorney staff or your hybrid outsourced workers. So I've had the privilege and honor of building relationships with customers and partners such as Bert and Four Eyes to build sessions like this that really bring your firm the action steps it needs and that you can apply to your practices to hopefully be more successful and scale out. So Bert, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, you guys. My name is Bert Diener. I'm an attorney. I have a firm. We have offices in North Carolina, California, and in Mexico. I also have a company called Four Eyes. We basically work with law firms and we kind of help measure and manage kind of their sales and marketing kind of processes. And in addition to that, I also have worked with about 50 law firms and help them kind of outsource work and kind of build their teams remotely. So I have a lot of experience. We think we help manage over 300 people working in law firms, in other countries. And so kind of teaming up with PracticePanther and Sam, hopefully we can bring y'all some value today.
Yes, amazing. Thanks, Bert. So with that, we're going to dive into the course here. I do want to preface by saying, a lot of people know attorneys, right? They're the lifeline, the lifeblood of any given firm. They open the firm, whether it's a small office or a large office. The attorneys are the one practicing the law, making the business run. And they're often leveraging non-attorney staff to help drive a lot of this business and help manage these cases. Thus, the success of the firm isn't just about how well the attorney themselves is practicing law, but how well they're maximizing the impact and return on the investment or the ROI on their non-attorney staff. It's funny, you don't ever hear about people talking about saying, oh, I learned how to do that in law school. It's just not something that I hear is being taught in law schools. And hopefully today we can kind of educate people out there listening to us and joining us on some of this. So while outsourcing, like I said, isn't really a new concept for law firms, it is, really an amazing thing that we're going to be talking and covering today on how you can maximize that impact. In fact, and according to a study conducted by Altman Wheel in 2019, law firms reported that they actually outsourced 24.1% of their non-lawyer functions. That's almost a quarter of their non-lawyer functions that's being outsourced. So as that percentage continues to rise, right, and the projected market size of legal process outsourcing is expected to eventually reach, $35.9 billion with a B, almost $36 billion by 2025. So what's this data telling us? What's it signaling to us? It's telling us that law firms see the value in outsourcing this work, right? And they're going to continue to rely on it to efficiently manage and grow their businesses. So like I said, while outsourcing is not very uncommon for law firms, learning to leverage the different types of contract workers and their abilities and tapping into the many resources at a law firm's disposal to create a working environment in which these people can thrive, that's a bit more irregular. And again, hopefully today, during our time today, Bert and I are going to uncover those ways that law firms can automate the processes and outsource them while staying compliant and addressing common questions and concerns. And we're really excited. So to get started, I'm going to talk about some of the key questions when it comes to scaling the impact of this non-attorney staff. And they're as follows, right? How do I improve my ROI on payroll? How do I create the best environment to maximize the impact of my staff? And how do I ensure that I'm staying compliant, which is, of course, so crucial as I implement these things and move forward with that. So with that being said, Bert's going to shine some light on how firms can find these resources based on their specific needs and talk a little bit about improving the payroll ROI. So go ahead, Bert.
All right, thanks, Sam.
Yeah.
So primarily when we're talking about outsourcing, there are some different genres when it comes to this. I think for a long time, like litigation firms have really pioneered the way in terms of outsourcing legal processes like discovery. You have teams of people doing document reviews. They have the software. They kind of break it down and they can do it more efficiently, right? And it's easy to build from there. There's also this other industry that, is not exclusive necessarily to the law, but people go to Upwork or they go to Fiverr and they try to get people to remotely do some aspect of work or some group of processes. And although it's cheap and it's nice and it's easy, this third component, there is a hybrid to the third category. The third category, we have remote work. Now, remote work, because of COVID, we're all familiar with, people working outside of the office. Well, if you think about it, what about people in other countries so you can leverage a lower pay rate within your teams? So if you took this whole notion of offshoring and you think about it in the remote work perspective, not just hiring locally and having people work from home, but hiring globally and having them work within the same platform, you really have an opportunity to scale your team and not fight this I would probably argue that this inertia that, hiring and everything else is getting more challenging. I'll tell you from my own firm's perspective, we've got over 100 people in my law firm and 2/3 of them work abroad. And so, as you can imagine, having that and continuing to scale as we're continuing to grow, we wouldn't be where we're at right now, nor as profitable, but for this opportunity. So now how you pull everybody together and how you do that, we're going to talk a little bit about, but, oftentimes you can find talent through offshoring or you can find talent through other agencies. But at the end of the day, it's getting everybody to function as a team is pretty much the biggest challenge. Now, if you're looking for where to find the legal processes, you can Google, like discovery companies. If you're looking at, offshoring, you have Upwork, you have all kinds of venues that are there. The remote work stuff takes a little bit of teasing out. And that's where, hopefully if you have questions at the end, you can send me some and I can try to, explain some opportunities for people. But at the end of the day, you've got to create an environment where everybody plays well. It's easy to hire somebody, in India or the Philippines or Mexico or South Africa. It's easy to do that. Having them function well is where the art is where the magic is. All right. So in terms of, I guess the next slide, in terms of how I can safely manage this hybrid staff, which we brought up this idea of hybrid staff as compared to remote workers, because really that is the trend of where we're going, right? We're trying to basically identify people, what I would argue is first people of character. Some people want to go out and just want to hire the perfect individual. Stop looking for the perfect individual. Find somebody with a skill set who has character and that they want to grow. And generally, if you're looking outside, if you're finding those core capabilities, you have this opportunity to build and scale your team. Now, the ABA makes I was actually very pleased to learn this, right? They have 0 prohibitions about hiring abroad. So, for those of us who are a little bit more risk adverse and we don't want to think about that, you just got to pay attention to, the rest of this conversation to identify what are the big points that we need to be focusing on. Now, like with any endeavor having to do with lawyers, we have to make sure that non-lawyers are not practicing law. And, in essence, they're not basically giving legal advice to your clients. There has to be some degree of supervision or some degree where they're repeating what you may have already have said. But this idea of supervision is really, if there was a crux to everything we're going to talk about today, the idea of how you basically put everybody on a platform and you have the ability to inspect and supervise is really what separates, it's really how you make this all work. And, the days of doing everything on paper and everybody having in their own silos just isn't realistic anymore. And you need to, if you're not already there, you got to embrace the whole virtual world, doing everything on a web-based platform. If you can do that, you can build in certain process to make sure that happens. So from a standpoint, in terms of just making sure that you're following the ABA guidelines, I'm going to have some more points here towards the second part of this conversation in terms of specific things that you can do to make sure you stay on point. But let's talk about the environment, because the environment is, in essence, the foundation. If you don't have the foundation, you don't have anything.
Exactly, Bert, exactly. And creating that environment to maximize that staff impact is so crucial and important to exactly what you're saying, how we can get everything running. So one of the main things is transitioning to a law practice management software. As the industry continues to exponentially grow from when I first started to now, and to seeing all these programs and all these different pieces of technology, transitioning your law firm to a cloud-based practice management software is one of the most common and proven ways to scale the impact of your non-attorney staff. These LPMs allow you to stay connected with your remote teams. They allow you to track their work progression. They allow you to collaborate and maintain accessibility to the important business documents. Without disruption to your business operations, your teams can now perform tasks like onboarding new clients with automated intake, maintaining digital files, managing billing from anywhere. So on one single platform, similar to like PracticePanther, you can put to rest the majority of your concerns with digital processes and managing remote staff, while all effortlessly meeting these ABA guidelines that we're talking about. And as with any new software or process you adopt, you'll need to assess your firm's needs. What are some of your current pain points? What do you need out of the practice management solution you're going with? So whether you're struggling with billing, document management, matter management, you really want to nail down and plan how you're going to utilize the LPM that you select for your day-to-day operations. And once you've identified your needs, you can begin the research. You can begin to look into the different solutions that are out there. And you can start your search online by reviewing as easy as going to the company websites, most importantly, the company reviews. And then, of course, there are a plethora of review sites out there that focus specifically on the legal technology programs. And they offer a host of information that can help identify which practice management is going to be the best for you. And once you've done a lot of this initial research, now you can begin to pick a few solutions that might meet your needs, right? So from there, what you really want to do is schedule some demos now, get on some demonstrations. These demos are no doubt the best way for you to see the LPM in action, to see the software working and moving and how all of its functionality ties together. Demos are really about you and your firm and what you need from the program to adapt to your firm, not the other way around. So be sure to come to these demonstrations prepared with questions. Help the trusted advisor and the salesperson who's doing the demo kind of steer the conversation to your needs so that you can get the best experience out of these demonstrations. I always like to say there's a lot of questions you can come up with depending on your practice area, the size of your firm, what's important to you, but there are 4 main things you should be asking, okay? What's your typical implementation process? What information you're going to need for the migration and the onboarding? Of course, what security features does your software offer? And does the software provide the support and training? And is it ongoing? Or do I have to watch materials and never able to speak to anyone? I often compare these 4 questions when I had to, I went out to buy a diamond to propose to my wife, and I learned about the 4 C's regarding, diamonds: the cut, the clarity, the color, and the carat. These are the 4 questions pertaining to practice management solutions. These are what's important, and then everything else you can kind of build around. So once you've done your research, you've completed your demos, you're likely going to have a better grasp on which LPM is best for you. And oftentimes when we talk to a lot of people, they might be stuck between 2, maybe 3 platforms, but the ultimate decision should really come to what we're talking about: the ease of use, the migration, the security, and that support, right?
Let me bring up one thing right here to add.
Yeah, of course.
Everybody, when you're hiring abroad, if you're trying to scale your team and save money, what Sam just said is incredibly important. The ability for people to learn a platform very quickly without somebody hovering over their shoulder, I can't overemphasize. Otherwise, if something what you're asking them to do is overly complex, the likelihood of them being successful goes down. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Sam. I just want to bring it up because I just remembered, this is a huge pain point for people when you are trying to build teams, scale them, and they may not be in the same office as you.
Exactly. No, I love it when you hit it on the head again. This is extremely important. It helps the staff, which we're going to tie into right now. These 3 milestones of transitioning to cloud-based software on the next slide you'll see here is exactly what Bert is alluding to, right? So the 3 pieces are your staff training, your clients, the people you're sending invoices to, and things like that. And then, of course, the downtime in which some practice management solutions can take months for you to get onboarded. But practice management, such as PracticePanther, helps with all of this, right? So we break it down into these 3 milestones. The first one, the staff training, right? Making sure that there's allocated time for that training, and then promoting the self-training. So while PracticePanther offers, a customer success rep who's going to walk you through the program and hold your hand throughout the whole onboarding, and even years down the road when you're scaling out and growing and hiring new people, we'll be able to help, make sure that they're getting trained and whatnot, but having a program that's easy to use where your staff can just get in almost like a turnkey operation and have the ongoing support is always going to bring peace of mind to the managing attorneys and the owners of the firm, knowing they don't, like Bert said, have to hover over the staff's shoulder to get all this done. The next thing is your client, right? For example, a big change for your clients might be the billings. A practice management solution like PracticePanther gives you the access to have a built-in payment processor that allows you to accept online payments now. So if you didn't have this before and your communication to clients, you might want to walk them through, hey, how is the new billing going to look like? Why is it easier? Why is it beneficial? How can you make payments? How will you receive the invoices moving forward? And all of this ties back to the benefit for your client. No more going to the bank, taking out cash to bring to the office or writing checks or needing to run around. Everything, it's a new era we're living in with fast evolving technology. So companies are getting paid online. And if you're not yet, you should be doing that already right now. And then lastly, managing that downtime. Transitioning to another program, you want to avoid any unnecessary downtime. You want to maintain the business continually. And this could be a concern when adopting any new piece of software. To some degree, your firm might need to allocate some of this time to migrate data, to get organized. With any LPM, the length could be, anywhere between 5 to 10 days, like on PracticePanther. But I've seen practice management that you're, waiting 3 months for all your data to be in. So make sure you're picking something that limits that downtime with staff that's going to hold your hand through that. Now, the best place to start is maybe with like a checklist. What's your firm need? What program were you coming from? Where you're migrating to the new system? The common things that you're going to want to migrate, it's going to be like the contacts, the matters, the financial data. And if you think back to all your data that your firm now has, these buckets often have a lot or all of the data, in my experience, that can cause a lot of the great delays. So this is an opportunity where you can not only limit the downtime, but also clean up a lot of this data. So I really recommend to people only moving active information over into the new system while still maintaining all the old data locally on your computer maybe. And adopting a new practice management can often, like I said, be a restart, almost a new start for the aspect of your business and moving to a new solution. It's also a great time to get organized, purge that data like we're talking about that's maybe no longer being used. Of course, you want to make sure you're within that time frame set forth by your bar association. I think normally it's between 5 and 7 years, and that should give you plenty of opportunity to make sure that you're limiting that downtime. And you really want to talk through with the practice management solution that you're going with and the staff there on how they handle that. Because I know with us, we've learned and gotten feedback in so many ways to understand how to limit all that. So while we're migrating your data, you're still able to be in the program and working and moving forward with the new solution. So these are really 3 important milestones that you want to comprehend and make sure it's a goal when you're moving to something else. And then a little bit about best practices and ensuring the compliance across your firm. Bert's going to highlight a lot about, what you should be doing there to mitigate all that.
Yeah, so not trying to kind of bore you all to death, but unfortunately, after you've already hired well over 1,000 people and kind of running them through the firm and watching other firms, I definitely have plenty of war stories. So I'm going to try not to bore everybody too much right now, but in terms of this managerial authority in a law firm, lawyers by and large, from my experience, we don't really like to manage. We like to basically practice law. We're trying to make money. We're trying to run a law firm, but at the end of the day, we really don't want to micromanage people. But that being said, we have an ethical requirement to do it regardless, right? So if it's not us, we've got to have this manager is doing it. So in terms of this reasonable efforts to ensure that the non-attorney's conduct is compatible with professional obligations of the lawyer, the main thing that you got to basically just keep in mind, right? If we're just going to make this simple, is that there's got to be somebody's got to have the responsibility to go back and inspect. We've got to go back periodically, whether it's weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever that is. We've got to go back and just periodically look through people's communications and just check. Even if I'm sure that you all can probably remember you're working with someone, you came across some of their work product and you're like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. This is horrible. I can't believe they did that. This inspection, especially as people are you're starting to add on more, whether it's you or whether it's a manager, it needs to basically and it needs to continue to happen. So, it's just an unavoidable component to what we're doing. And it's actually can be a good thing. You can actually spot good things, you can spot bad things, you can give feedback. One of the main challenges that we do see across firms, because literally, we consult with a lot of different firms really and try to, how do you pull this stuff together? It's how I got to know PracticePanther so well, as I wanted to know what was going on under the hood and what capabilities did they have. And so as we kind of shared back and forth over the last 3 or 4 years, I've learned a lot about their side, but they've got to hear it also from practitioners in terms of what's really required. So this ability to this inspection, one of the things that PracticePanther does, and some of the other ones do as well, is they have basically audit logs where you can go back and kind of check. And once again, there is no state bar that basically requires us to be completely responsible for our employees. But it does require us to be, exercise reasonable care. And it does require us to basically take remedial measures upon us finding it out. So the second kind of component, the lawyer manager knows the conduct at the time when the consequences can be avoided or mitigated, but it fails to do so, that's how you kind of get in trouble. So I would say that the virtual world in terms of software, there's a beautiful opportunity, right? So if you had a bar complaint, if you had something along those lines, we can go back and recreate the record. And we can basically use that as a defense. So other than the fact that, inspection and remediation and just kind of curating a record, I think that they're fairly low bars. And if you can bake this into some of your business processes, you're going to be that much stronger for it. All right. So in terms of the next slide, the ABA Standing Committee on Ethics and Cloud-Based Computing, I thought this was real interesting. Those of us who have been practicing more than a couple of years, we remember the days whether you're in court or someplace else and you didn't have access to that information. You're kind of like, I can't see my calendar, I can't get this client record, I can't get that. So we carried around those big files. Well, leave it to the state bars to go ahead and point out the obvious, that you need to have access to all of this information. And so whether you're in a courtroom, whether you're on vacation, whether you're in something else, having access to this information is now basically part of our duty. They're pretty clear. It's no longer a nice to have, it's you should have. And that being said, if you do have people working in different time zones, they may be asking you questions when you're off. And so your ability to kind of respond in this whole kind of 24/7 world that we're living in right now is just part of, it's just part of what we have to do. So in terms of, I would say in terms of the next slide, in terms of the Standing Committee on Ethics, the slide 13, let's just kind of talk about some of the best practices. There's actually several points here. And once again, some of y'all may be just listening just for the sake of getting a CLE, right? A free CLE, been there, done that, right? No judgment here. But there are some things that you may not be on your radar that at least I'd like to plant the seed on. The first one is that under no circumstances, in my professional opinion, should you be operating on a platform that just operated from your own server. Okay. The whole ransomware kind of thing is primarily targeted to individuals that are doing stuff just on their computer or just on a local server. So if you have a practice management software that you're doing that, you're kind of playing with fire. Okay. In terms of the cloud-based, what they do is they build in on these, like I know PracticePanther is hosted on Microsoft Azure platform. They basically leave themselves backdoors to get in there and to kind of make sure that they're not going to be compromised. So that's one reason, not to mention of, you having to tell your clients that you somehow or another, were compromised, and that whole headache. Going to the cloud is absolutely required. The second thing is the bar kind of recommends be careful who you give a password to. Now, I would kind of almost laugh at that now, considering how easy it is to change passwords, and you can set in requirements that passwords can be changed frequently. But especially with audit trails, I'm sure some of the people who make recommendations in the state bar are maybe a little bit more mature than some of us and maybe less experience with technology. So this may not be as much of an issue. In terms of if somebody was saying, oh, look, I've paid for the software, I have it on my computer, the security component is really big. One of the really, really, really cool things that I did learn that's important, I know PracticePanther does this, is if you're basically trying to hire people remotely and especially from abroad, sometimes if you do that, you're trying to limit the ability, the access points where somebody can basically get at that information. They can actually limit, those of you all, I'm sure probably the majority of you know what an IP address is, but an IP address is an address that's assigned to you from your service provider. It's a way of identifying who's basically accessing that information. They can actually limit, PracticePanther can actually limit people so they can only access it on certain devices with that IP address. And the reason why that would be important is that sometimes when you're basically hiring, let's say internationally, you may want them to actually work in a building. That's what we recommend. Because you want to limit access to printers. You want them to work on the computer, leave the computer there. So when they leave, so there are no issues. And in terms of crazy stories, the worst ones I've ever heard were Americans working abroad that basically did stuff with data they weren't supposed to. That's the worst I've actually heard with the Americans working abroad as compared to the individuals who may be working abroad that may be a different nationality. So it's not as much of an issue as people would think. People worry about social security numbers, other kind of confidentiality kind of components, but I haven't seen it being much of an issue. Now, you should still have people sign a confidentiality agreement. You do when you're basically getting on one of these platforms. We've got to make sure that you're on a major platform like PracticePanther, and they're not just basically passing the buck in terms of responsibility, that they've got to own it and they've got to be a good partner with you. But you've got to make sure that, from an encryption perspective, that it's there. Now, when I've actually first reached out to PracticePanther, my brother was the chief security officer for the San Francisco Fed. And just out of curiosity, I was like, hey, I was just reading off the website kind of what they were doing. And I think you have military grade security, you have bank grade security, mainstream. And at least the feedback I had gotten back then is that these guys know what they're doing. So don't take that as if I'm an expert or so, but I did consult an expert on that. So at least when I was looking around, I did kind of check into those aspects. But from the most part, it's just asking the questions, and as long as you're with a major player and you're not trying to go cheap, you're thinking ahead. And once again, y'all can ask questions or anything if you had any other kind of concerns. But lawyers are really good about worrying about stuff that never happens, and that's part of our job. But there has got to be a line that, especially if it's preventing you from acting. So yeah, but for the most part, other than the agreements and making sure that it's clear, and we have some inspection components, you can be pretty good. I will say, just as one little kind of somebody who does a lot of this, one of the main reasons why when you are trying to expand or trying to get as much out of your staff as you possibly are, my firm, we handle probably 5,000 cases a year. Probably the reason, the biggest challenge for most firms, other than making sure that everybody's in the same sheet of music, is going to be engagement. And you get around engagement primarily by, you want them to be engaged with the work, with their mission. Well, you've got to be engaged with them as a human being. And so if we can do both of those, that's where kind of the synergy kind of evolves. So regardless of with that person, whatever country, we have people in India that are working for us, Mexico, Venezuela. We have a few different people working in different places, and but it's helped us remain profitable, exceedingly so here for a good while. And but you just got to pay your dues. You got to get on the platform. You got to make it happen. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, you're ahead of the game there with all this, and now it's just like becoming common practice, for a lot of different firms, and it's really awesome to hear your insight through your experience, Bert, for sure. And then, a lot of what he's talking about, obviously all makes sense as we're listening to it, but the important thing is also having the systems in place. He alluded to the restriction of the IP address, if that's important to you, or, the sensitive tasks, making sure that you're remaining professionally compliant on top of those. So having systems in place to not only make sure everything's compliant and acting professionally, but also to help automate a lot of this will then, again, help you maximize a lot of that staff that's being outsourced and those hybrid workers that are there in your firm. And of course, this all goes back to managing the remote staff. And a lot of us have learned about that through the unfortunate pandemic of having to work from home now and see all of this come to fruition. So a really great way to streamline some of these tasks that we're talking about, while of course maintaining that compliance, is with something called automated workflows. And if you never heard of this, or maybe you've heard of it, but not exactly sure what they are, it's just basically a simple way for firms to ensure they're always meeting certain deadlines and tasks. These workflows will also automate the creation of these tasks and pre-assign to the people who are responsible for them in the firm. So, he's got people, Bert, that is having them work in Mexico, Venezuela, India and things, having those tasks created in his office, wherever he is, and then being applied to those people in their different offices and them getting notifications and things like that allows you to have a lot more peace of mind knowing that these things are being assigned to people, those people are being notified, and they're able to get all of that done without having to, again, hover over their shoulders. So these workflows really help you automate the creation of these tasks and pre-assign them. And you can even set preset reminders in certain systems like PracticePanther. Well, if I know something needs to be done tomorrow, but I never answer my emails, but I'm very good at having my phone on me all the time, maybe I want to get a text to my cell phone telling me that something needs to be done, or a pop-up in the program telling me when it needs to be done, an hour before it or a day before it, however you want to set those up. This feature is also great when it comes to meeting those ABA guidelines that we're talking about, and for the outsourcing the work and maintaining the file accessibility. For instance, you can create a flow for outsourcing work, which maybe includes, proper due diligence to acquire the work, then create the agreement, then having the scope of work, then the payment arrangement. So all of these are tasks of lists and events that need to get done for specific types of contractual work, or even things for cases and whatnot. And then the workflow is created. And rather than recreating that wheel each time you have to contract a third party, for example, you have this preset workflow that exactly tells you what needs to be done and by who, and lets them know. So allowing the software to kind of automate all of this. No more having to inform your staff what needs to get done, by who, when it needs to get done, which gives you the time back to be able to focus on the law that you're practicing at hand. And rather than just letting the workflow feature serve as the guide, it's going to allow you to stay compliant and, of course, accountable, and making sure everyone is doing what they need to do. So whether you're hiring a virtual paralegal or outsourcing other staff, automated workflows really allow you to standardize this process in your firm, and it leaves no room for compliance issues or confusion of any kind. We get a lot of great feedback on this. It even allows for triggers, right? I complete task A and task B is required to be completed by Bert. As soon as I complete A, Bert gets a notification it's ready to complete B. So really cool stuff behind that technology as well. And then moving along, I want to talk a little bit about maintaining, your digital file security at your firm, such as, like, if you're not already, you definitely should get this, whether it's a program you have now, or when you look into PracticePanther, ask about the e-signature and e-payments. But maintaining all that digital file security at your firm is going to be, again, so important. So a common concern with many law firms that I speak to is the security. And again, Bert was hitting it right on the head with this stuff behind the IP address. And then there's also things like, the client documentation, the firm data, the financial data, the sensitive information within the cloud-based solutions, and making sure that that cloud-based product is supremely secure on top of all of that. And I think that's the best feature about modern day, LPMs on the cloud, is that they're updated routinely, automatically, and consistently. We know cyber attacks, we read about them. Hopefully no one here has been, breached by any of them, but you read about how they're all over the place for different amounts of reasons. They can, come at you. You don't know why or where or how, but when it hits you, you know it. And this is really with outdated software. They're the most vulnerable, and the antiquated programs out there leave you kind of like an open door. So make sure you're looking into a modern piece of technology that provides all of this security, so that you don't get a secure cybersecurity breach. And of course, a program like PracticePanther, your files, your payment information, they're all securely stored and safeguarded with these passwords. So whether you're sending documents back and forth for e-signature, or you're sending invoices to process payments from clients or even a third party, your data is going to be secured with the robust industry standard safety features like encryption and tokenization. And we're talking, we were mentioning encryption a little bit. If you're looking at any program, albeit PracticePanther or another solution perhaps, The only thing I'll tell you to definitely ask around encryption is whether the program's encrypted at transit and at rest. A lot of systems out there only do it, let's say, at rest, and then you leave yourself vulnerable to when the data is in transit. So PracticePanther, for example, is encrypted both in transit and at rest, and that's something I would definitely ask if you are, scheduling demos and talking to practice management solutions out there. And then to talk about some of the security protocols in your hiring process, Bert really does a fantastic job at explaining this. So I'm excited to hear what he has on that.
Yeah, so great. So let's talk about, there's a lot of ways to kind of build up your team and try to make sure that we're doing better at it, right? We're building a stronger team, that our ROI per dollar spent on manpower is improving. Let's say profit per dollar spent on, it's a metric that I use, right? So that's the name of the game. So right in front of you, we have a few components like these 4 boxes. If you're hiring abroad, this is why sometimes Upwork is not the best choice, because you want to actually have a local background check. The last thing in the world you need to do is have somebody who's embezzled from other people and they just do this for a living, moving from company to company. And no different than here, right? The non-disclosure agreement's the same thing, boilerplate language. If you need one, I'm happy to forward one to you. It's obviously the truth is that you're sending them a document that's been written to be enforced in the United States, but they're in a foreign country or something else. So, but it's the principle of it all. And then in terms of the scope of work, in terms of identifying what exactly are they going to be doing and what are they responsible for? This primarily is going to go to helping your inspection and I think from a component in terms of trying to, let's say, remedy a situation that may have come up. Look, this is, you can limit access to certain information, right? So that's one of the big things. If we have a scope of work, they don't need to have access to the accounting. Like if they're basically helping discovery, or let's say they're, just filtering emails, or let's say, they're translating or whatever the other kind of work, we need to be smart. And this is probably something that you're a firm administrator, at least you can ask the questions and figure out how to do that. In terms of the supervision kind of perspective, the big question is going to come down to is most of the ABAs, like, even the California state bars kind of opinions is it really kind of comes down to is, are they going to be engaging with the client? If they're engaging with the client, that's primarily where we have to be kind of careful with what they're saying. There is some discussion in terms of whether or not you have to tell them they're in another country. I see no place that's required. And at this point, people are kind of used to people working all over the place, but I see no reason to advertise you have somebody else in another country. If they have a thick accent, they're going to be talking to clients, that's your call. But at the end of the day, in terms of the work location, having people work from home in another country, have them working from an office. One of the big issues that you got, number one, is the internet. People working from home are going to be on traditionally unstable internet connections, and so you want to be on a stable one. You also want to be on a secure connection, right? So if they're basically in wireless and from their home, that might not be the best thing that we need to be doing. An equipment perspective, are you going to be working on their equipment or yours? Now, if you're on yours, you can install key logging software, and that's where you can make sure that they're doing their job when they're supposed to be, and we can get a record of everything, even if they were doing it outside of the practice management software. So I recommend, this is what we do. Is we have, there's some people that work from home, but they're the exceptions, but the vast majority of them are in a facility. We have basically fiber internet. They're on the computers. We have key logging software and everything else. And we're tracked to make sure that they're in there. And we have the ability, if we see something up, somebody can go and close the computer, they can take it out. So that's how you get the benefit of the low wages, but also with the security features that you need. In terms of employee monitoring components, that's just the same thing in terms of limiting the access to certain aspects of the software, the monitoring tools, in terms of even have ones that basically even on the camera, like if what we do is we actually buy laptops for our staff abroad. And primarily one of the issues is that because sometimes electricity can be a little bit unstable there. And so you don't have to kind of go buy the battery backups. But the second thing is that video camera right there. And so you can get shots on to make sure that they're doing, because if they have certain inactivity, you can trigger things to make sure that they're on point. The goal is not to micromanage or just stay right on top of them, but you also have to make sure that you're setting up, you're not creating temptation to kind of put the coffee cup on the keyboard, which I've seen beforehand. Go out, take a 2.5 hour lunch, and just make sure they're not taking advantage of your kindness. There's also, what Sam had basically indicated in terms of the workflows. One of the things about workflows are not just in terms of making the next step happen, but it's basically tracking work progress. So in terms of the ability to, kind of make sure that the platform that you're on and your team are staying on point, so you're in sync. That's a big situation. Now, compensation is actually a big issue that some people aren't aware of. And there are, from the bar's perspectives, if we employ people in another country, we have to respect their laws as well. Paying people directly sometimes, obviously you could say, well, look, they're an independent contractor. Well, I would argue it's not quite that simple. And I'll give you an example. In Mexico, they changed the law because a lot of companies in Mexico were basically using outsourcing to basically just pay their staff members and not pay taxes. And the Mexican government, when they changed government, they went and cracked down on it. And in order to basically have a call center or an outsourcing center, you have to have a permit from the government. And so I'm fully aware with all that, how that works now. And so if you wire money to people in Mexico, people's bank accounts start getting frozen. And if you think about the proliferation with, the different forms of digital currencies out there, I think this is a trend. The trend is going to be that, there's going to be a specific process that money has to change hands, and they're going to lock people down to make sure that they get that tax revenue. So if you're, if somebody were doing it, just paying somebody directly for now, that's fine. But I'm going to tell you that two things can happen. One, they can freeze that money and that person not get the money, and then you have to basically spend it a second time. And all they have to do is basically make a telephone call to a state bar and say, listen, this law firm has an employee, somebody working in our country, and they're not following the laws. Whoa, that's not one I would want to play around with. Okay. But that being said, you have the ability, if you do hire abroad, you have the ability to pay higher than the going rate. So you can put the golden handcuffs on people, for much easier. You can also respect the 5-day work week. In some countries, 6-day work weeks are the norm. So, by kind of taking advantage of some of these other opportunities in these countries, I think we got a technical issue, right, guys? That's all good. But in terms of taking advantage of some of these, these opportunities, your ability to not just recruit but to retain those guys are fantastic. Now, on the abroad kind of thing, that's one of the big issues, and I'll just say this: we've seen it beforehand. Some countries, especially less developed countries, some of the laws are actually more pro-worker, at least in the courts. And so what you don't want to do is skip over some of the rules and the regulations and have them come after the fact and wield this as a weapon against you. So it's not just, you can go in there and just hire one person, just hope it all works out, but you should be in tune to what is a long-term strategy that works and scales so you can do it. So it's platform, it's basically where are we going to invest and how we're going to grow our teams. And I promise you the juice is worth the squeeze. It may seem a little bit overwhelming, just one step at a time. I personally would say it's the foundation first. You get the foundation, then you add on. People who add on people and then try to basically re-engineer everything, and basically the complexity kind of really complicates, pulling it all together, foundation, and we kind of build up. So hopefully that answered some of those questions, Sam.
Definitely, I can imagine. I mean, I'm seeing, coming towards the end here. And first, I just want to thank everyone, obviously, for joining, taking time out, not just for the CLE credits, but to listen to both Bert and I talk about a lot of this, important stuff. And thank you to Bert, always awesome hanging out with you and talking, and just, always a pleasure working with you. And then we do have some times for, a little bit of time for questions. I saw a few pop into the chat. Some probably right up your alley, Bert, if you want to take a few of these. I'm seeing, in your experience, how quickly are offshore resources able to ramp up on an LPM software?
Okay, yeah. So as long as the skill set that you're trying to basically focus in on is relatively simple, like I can just tell you from when we onboarded with PracticePanther as an example, we were on a different one. There was almost little to no pushback in terms of my own existing team. At that time, we probably had 65 or 60, that ballpark number of people on the platform. I really didn't have much pushback. When you're hiring abroad, you're hiring younger people that are technology savvy. And as long as the platforms are intuitive and based on those functions, it doesn't take very long for them to get up to speed. It really doesn't. The goal is not losing the attention span of that person. If we take some things for granted and we don't keep them engaged and we don't try to make things easy, they're going to get frustrated and leave, and then you got to start all over again.
Exactly. I mean, that also kind of ties into, obviously it might be different for you with hundreds of staff across international or even smaller staff, but I bet you could help answer this also, is like, who's going to manage that and own the hybrid staff or the outsourcing? Like, who's going to own and manage them to be able to make sure they're doing what they need to do and ramping up on it?
So there's a couple strategies there. So number one, I actually take 3 tiers when we're basically hiring abroad. There's actually 3 tiers of employees, and there's a progression. So the first tier, rather than trying to hire somebody who's extremely skilled, because I've done that before and try to hire PhDs and do other kind of stuff, but there seems to be, some challenges there. Hiring at the base level to basically administrative work. And as long as they are curious, the character's there, they're highly motivated, you have the ability to do, and they could be on phones, they could be scanning and labeling. There's all kinds of administrative work that you can do. You're looking for the ones who want to continue to learn. And then what you can do is pair them up with a paralegal or somebody else and move them up to the second level. And I would say that would be kind of more substantive kind of casework kind of components. So not just does a manager from a law firm do that, but ideally you want to have them do some type of work where we can see that it's worth us to invest more time and energy into training. Because if you start right off the bat and start to do all the training, you're going to go crazy, because it is a numbers game. I don't care if it's in the United States or abroad, but if we can find out that they're serious and we invest, what you're going to have happen is that this paralegal is not going to see this person as somebody who's going to replace them. They're going to be their friend.
Right.
And one of the cool things that you can do is you can say, listen, everything that you don't want to do, I want you to train this other individual to do. Take all the stuff you don't want to, give it to them. And then after they've learned those skills, you can say, all right, now train them how to do everything that you can do. So if you're not here, they can do it for you. I will never replace you with this individual. And that's how you can basically almost double in size and double in size and double in size. The third tier that you're looking for are leaders, natural leaders. Leadership on a remote basis is probably more important than ever, because how do you basically pull people together and set a course and follow in a remote world? Some people can do that. So you're always looking for leaders, and you're looking for, obviously first, we're looking for people who are smart. They want the job. They want to do it. Number two, do they have an eagerness to want to grow and basically looking for additional things to do so we can mold them? And the third thing we're looking for is people that can lead others. And so that way you as the law firm owner or the manager, can kind of scale the decision making, because that's really what you need to scale. Is you have to scale people who can make quality decisions that are consistent with our, our responsibilities, and go from there.
For sure. Or just clone 1,000 Berts, get all that.
That wouldn't work for me.
Someone asked, can we get a copy of the presentation slides? I do believe the recording of this CLE webinar will be posted on the Beverly Hills Bar Association. I will also get your information and see if we can send you over a copy of it. Bert, for you, did you say you provide laptops to folks working for you abroad?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
But it's good. That's because we have somebody go into the location. There's some people that work from home, but that's the minority. We have them come into the office, but we do purchase the laptops. The laptops, once again, we get to install the software, the other key logging software, the capturing screen capture software, the videos kind of software, and we have the ability to, for lack of better words, we get to control the internet. And so it's just a matter of maintaining as much control as possible. I was worried initially when we started doing outsourcing, like kind of abroad, like hiring abroad, which was 7 years ago. That's where we actually set up our first office to do this in Mexico. And we actually did it at the beach. I figured if we're going to hire abroad, people are hiring in India, why couldn't I go to Mexico and be in the beach and drink margaritas while I was with the team?
That's
and so
right.
That's what we did, right? But there were a lot of challenges. It wasn't as easy as I make it sound. But that being said, buying the laptops, everybody says they have the stuff. I just want to have as much control as I possibly can over everything.
For sure. regarding the restriction of the IP address on PracticePanther, does that work internationally? Simple answer is yes. Any IP address, you can definitely restrict that to the address you want to make sure those people are working in that, in that office or wherever they may be. Bert, how do you know when you should hire more staff?
All right, so now we're going to get into like my little consulting kind of world kind of hat. I primarily break it down into, you have 4 core areas of a law firm. We have how you basically get your clients, how you get paid, how you get the work done, and your ability to build a team to basically, let's just say, a talent pipeline. Anything that directly relates to money and you have a bottleneck in, so whether it's getting new clients, if you have a bottleneck, something that's preventing you from getting it, if hiring would help alleviate that, well, then we got to look at hiring, because the whole point is to generate more revenue. If
Right.
getting paid, let's say in the collection side, you can't actually follow up with all your clients that may be past due, it's time to hire, right? Because you're going to make more people, make more money. In terms of the workflow side, this is a really, really, really big one. And this is one of the ones, some of my initial conversations with Sam on the workflow side, working with PracticePanther, in which I tell the people at PracticePanther, they don't understand. Workflow is like lawyer porn. I'm sorry for being, that's not inappropriate.
Yeah.
Lawyers love talking about workflow. In a workflow, you have stages. And each one is, you'll be able to identify over a week's time, one of those stages of that workflow is going to be the bottleneck. If you can basically move people there, so you expand that bottleneck, the bottleneck will pop up someplace else. But here's the point. You hire to make everything move through faster, to decrease inventory. If you can make everything move faster and decrease inventory, you can make a lot more money.
Perfect sense to me. Let's see. Anything, this is an interesting one. I didn't think about this, but what about HIPAA protected docs with overseas workers? Do you have any experience in that?
Yeah, I mean, still HIPAA is primarily a security kind of question. Right. So it's like, where is it stored? Is there any access?
Right.
Everybody's, most law firms are touching HIPAA related documents. Anybody does any kind of injury work or anything along those lines, you have HIPAA stuff. And, whereas lawyers, I mean, I've never seen a HIPAA issue pop up with a law firm, period. In terms of, so I think it's a good question to ask, but I don't think it's one that's probably should prevent anything. If you follow a lot of the points that Sam and I brought up, you will have more accountability, inspection, oversight than 99% of the law firms in the United States.
Yep.
Right. So when you actually go abroad and you try to scale this, you're going to put a few things in place. They're going to separate you from everybody else. Now, if there is some type of disclosure or something else, still, I think that, at the end of the day, the liability from some of that would have to be minimal.
Amazing. Someone asked, do you have any resources for a new associate on how they should be using non-attorney staff, any best practices, pitfalls, etc.? Definitely. I mean, we would, I'll get your information. We can send some stuff over, even set up a call to consult about this. We'd be more than happy to do that on my end. Anything from you on that, Bert?
This goes to just like when you're hiring people with the non-attorney staff members. Number one, lawyers have a tendency to try to do everything themselves, especially new lawyers. They want to have as maximum control as possible. Well, there's some things you don't need control over. Anything that's not revenue generating, if they can, they should get it over there. Now, here's another philosophical point. Your least compensated person, you should consider having them do as much as they possibly can. Most firms and new attorneys want to have the most experienced or expensive person do everything they can, and anything they can't do, they move it down. When you flip that and you take your least compensated person, have them do as much as they can, so really your most compensated person does the things only they can do, you can scale the bottom of the pyramid much more effectively. There's less stress at the top. It's a sustainable kind of process. But that, in terms of feedback, you've got to challenge that young attorney. I know that they're nervous and they're trying to learn everything, but they also have to learn how to be smart with their time and their energy.
Love it. And then we'll finish the Q&A with one last one here. What is the best way to track, monitor the time of the outsourced resources? So from my end, I mean, seeing so many different, including Bert and other firms, utilizing PracticePanther to be able to track that, right? Not just the time that they're billing and whatnot, but all those tasks that are associated with the workflows or the different documents, through automation of these documents, the intake, the electronic signatures, all of this is so important to, like the question asked, how do you track and monitor it? Everything in the system in PracticePanther is going to have an audit trail. I can see who did what, when, what time. These audit stamps are so important for whoever it may be, the managing attorney or the associates to go in and see these things and look at the list of these things and see, oh, Bert did this at this time. Sam tracked this many hours. He's not hitting, his quota for the month or the week and so on and so forth. So having all the insight through a system like PracticePanther is going to easily allow you to monitor and track that type of time and on those outsourced resources that are utilizing the program.
Yeah,
anything to add there?
Yeah, I got one thing. This is a big one too. This is a realization I probably didn't get until probably 2 years ago. The realization is that we as lawyers, we hate waste. We hate waste. We hate to think somebody's sitting around and this is going up, they're not getting everything they can done. And I'm going to challenge you that there's a different way of doing it. This goes right in line with what Sam's saying. Instead of trying to make sure that somebody is busy the entire time, let's set a target. What is the result we're looking for? And what's that number? If we do that, what we're going to find is people are going to be much more efficient with their time. And that's how you can incentivize certain conduct, like a result. Because, nothing burns out a person more if they think their boss is trying to get everything out of them they possibly can. Now, if you challenge that person, look, this is the end number you got. I understand you have to take some breaks and everything else. I'm fine, but you got to hit this number. You got it? They'll do that work faster. And you have value-added billing. You have a lot of strategies that you can do this. But when you're engaging these teams, start measuring the end result as compared to the busy time. Because I know, people who bill by the hour, busy time is in some ways, how they get paid. Exactly. But it's also how you burn people out. And whatever we do, we have to eliminate the pain points for our teams to keep people there. And we have to give them targets that build their self-esteem up so they feel better about themselves, so they get the kudos, so it all works. So what Sam just said in terms of tracking what's been done and coming down to a number, that's probably more powerful metric than the key logging software and were they busy the entire time. Far more powerful. I'd rather have somebody 50% inactive but getting twice the work done in that amount of time than the alternative. And I used to be, are they busy? And I no longer do that.
Yep. Work smart, not hard, right? That's what right. They say.
That's right. And if you do that, they're more likely to be happy.
Yeah.
And if you can identify what it's worth for them to do those, you can create these small incentives, especially abroad. And you can make somebody really dependent upon those bonuses. And then now they're just kind of keep raising their game. There is a game to all of this, but you got to make sure that you set yourself up right.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I've seen firms using us that provide the quota versus realization, and it's so inspiring to their staff when they exceed these quotas and are getting whether compensation because of it or recognition that allows them to even work better beyond that. And to finish off here, again, we're just so happy to have been here with all of you. Again, we just had a great time going over some of this stuff, but you can see here, I don't want anyone to forget, as part of the Beverly Hills Bar Association, you're eligible to get 10% off your PracticePanther subscription. If you haven't yet, please feel free to reach out to us, schedule a demo, get on with one of our reps, learn a little bit about how we can adapt to your practice and make you, more efficient in what you're doing on the day-to-day. And if you need anything from Bert or Four Eyes, feel free to hit their website, email Bert. And again, if you need anything on the practice management side, even if it's just a consulting session, just to talk about legal technology, I'm always happy to jump on calls, learn from you, teach you, and work together down in the future. So Bert, it's awesome, man. Had a pleasure here and can't wait to keep on talking.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you all.